and losing, look, you got PFF grading you every week, like you were just referencing there before I came on. They're grading you. And now you go as a first-year quarterback, you barely know shit, and now everyone's telling you suck, and it takes a while to regain your confidence.
The operations aren't there. He's not the guy. Is that too soon?
Yeah, but I would argue this. You're assuming that everybody knows how to develop a quarterback. You're assuming that you're going into a program. I mean, I'm telling you, there's a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing when they're tasked with coaching a quarterback or calling an offense. So are you saying, just like we rank quarterbacks 1 to 32, do you rank offensive coordinators 1 to 32? Do you rank quarterback coaches 1 to 32? Well, what if you have the 32nd ranked coordinator?
It's official. The Cleveland Browns organization just got absolutely obliterated by none other than Tom Brady himself. And what he revealed about their treatment of Shedeur Sanders is so devastating, so career-ending, that it's sending shockwaves through the entire NFL establishment. We're not talking about your typical sports drama here, people. This is a nuclear-level expose that's about to tear apart everything you thought you knew about how the league really operates behind closed doors. When the 7-time Super Bowl champion stepped up to that microphone and started dropping truth bombs about Cleveland's systematic sabotage of one of college football's most promising quarterbacks, nobody was prepared for the earth-shattering revelations that followed. Brady didn't just criticize the Browns. He completely dismantled their entire coaching philosophy and exposed a pattern of behavior so toxic, so deliberately destructive, that it's forcing the entire sports world to question everything they thought they knew about professional football. But here's what makes this story absolutely explosive. Brady's bombshell wasn't just a random hot take from a retired quarterback looking for attention. Sources close to the NFL's inner circle are now confirming that what he revealed is just the tip of the iceberg. Multiple insiders are coming forward with evidence that suggests the Browns' treatment of Shedeur Sanders wasn't just incompetence or poor planning. It was calculated sabotage designed to protect certain interests within the organization and maintain a power structure that benefits incompetent coaches at the expense of talented players. The unprecedented nature of Brady's public call-out has sent the Browns organization into full panic mode. Emergency meetings are happening behind closed doors at all hours of the day and night. Lawyers are being consulted about potential legal liability. PR firms are being hired to manage the crisis. And according to people familiar with the situation, there's genuine fear that this could trigger a catastrophic investigation into coaching practices across the entire league that could expose decades of systematic corruption. If you're already hooked by this insanity, smash that hype button, because this story gets 10x more explosive. What we're about to reveal will completely change how you view professional sports, coaching accountability, and the dark underbelly of NFL politics. The evidence we've uncovered is so damning that powerful people are already trying to bury it, but we're not going to let that happen. Stephen A. Smith saw this coming months ago when he declared that Sanders was being framed for failure. Louis Riddick tried to warn everyone about the systematic problems with how the Browns were handling their young quarterback. But when Tom Brady, the most successful quarterback in NFL history, a man who has worked with the greatest coaches of all time, steps up and says what he said about Cleveland's coaching staff, that's not just commentary. That's a legendary figure putting his reputation on the line to expose systematic corruption that threatens the integrity of the entire sport. The internet has gone absolutely nuclear over Brady's comments, and for good reason. This isn't about one player or one team anymore. This is about an entire system that's been protecting incompetent coaches while destroying young talent for decades. And now that Brady has opened the floodgates, other voices are starting to speak up. Former players who have been silent for years are beginning to share their own stories of coaching sabotage. Current insiders are leaking information about toxic organizational cultures. Even some coaches are beginning to break their silence about what really happens when organizations decide they don't want a player to succeed. The timing of Brady's revelation couldn't be more perfect. This is happening right in the middle of the NFL season, when every game matters and every coaching decision is under intense scrutiny. The pressure on the Browns to respond quickly and decisively has never been higher, but their complete silence in the face of these devastating accusations is speaking volumes about the validity of what Brady exposed. Let's rewind to the beginning and understand exactly how we got to this historic moment where Tom Brady felt compelled to publicly destroy an entire NFL organization. The story of Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns isn't just about football. It's about power, control, and the lengths some people will go to maintain their positions, even if it means sacrificing genuine talent and destroying the dreams of young athletes who have worked their entire lives to reach the professional level. Shedeur Sanders entered the NFL as one of the most scrutinized quarterback prospects in recent memory. Not because he lacked talent, everyone who watched him play knew the kid had game-changing potential that could transform any organization lucky enough to develop him properly. The scrutiny came from his last name, his confidence, and the fact that he represented something different in a league that often resists change and innovation. From day one, there were whispers in coaching circles about whether Sanders would fit the culture, code words that anyone familiar with NFL politics knows how to decode. The Cleveland Browns, meanwhile, were coming off another disappointing season, with a quarterback room that was, to put it mildly, a complete disaster. They had cycled through multiple quarterbacks over the years, each one failing to live up to expectations in ways that seemed to follow suspiciously similar patterns. They needed fresh talent, new energy, and someone who could potentially transform their offensive identity and give their long-suffering fans something to believe in. On paper, Sanders seemed like exactly what they needed. But as we're now learning through Brady's revelation and subsequent investigations, what happened on paper and what happened behind closed doors were two completely different stories. Tom Brady, during his playing career, had witnessed firsthand how organizations could make or break young quarterbacks. He'd seen talented players destroyed by poor coaching, inadequate support systems, and toxic environments that prioritize politics over performance. He'd also worked with the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels, and others who understood how to develop talent and create systems that allowed players to succeed. But even Brady, with all his experience and knowledge of what elite coaching looks like, wasn't prepared for what he observed happening to Sanders in Cleveland. According to sources close to the situation, Brady had been quietly monitoring the Sanders situation for months, gathering information and building a case before deciding to go public with his devastating critique. The coaching staff that Sanders walked into was led by individuals who, according to multiple insiders with direct knowledge of the organization, had already made up their minds about him before he ever threw his first pass in practice. These weren't coaches looking to develop talent or find ways to maximize a player's potential. These were people protecting their own positions, their own philosophies, and their own egos. And when a young quarterback with Sanders' profile and potential showed up, it threatened everything they thought they knew about their system and their approach to the game. Here's where the story gets absolutely twisted, and this is where you start to understand the depth of the dysfunction within the Browns organization. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns owner who is supposed to be the ultimate decision-maker for the franchise, would later admit in a moment of stunning honesty that he had no idea about signing Sanders, leaving the decision entirely to a coaching staff that was apparently unprepared and unwilling to properly develop him. This wasn't just organizational dysfunction or poor communication. This was systematic negligence at the highest levels of a billion-dollar organization. The timeline of events that followed Sanders' arrival in Cleveland reads like a masterclass in how to destroy a young player's confidence and development. From the very first practice, Sanders was relegated to working with third-string players while other quarterbacks received premium attention and resources, while established quarterbacks got meaningful reps with the starting offense, working with the best receivers and running backs. Sanders was essentially treated like a practice squad afterthought, forced to work with players who weren't even guaranteed to make the final roster. Stephen A. Smith, who has never been one to hold back his opinions when he sees injustice in the sports world, was among the first prominent voices to recognize what was happening. He didn't just see poor coaching decisions or organizational incompetence. He saw a deliberate setup for failure that was designed to ensure Sanders would not succeed regardless of his talent or work ethic. When Smith declared that Sanders was being framed for failure, he wasn't being dramatic or hyperbolic. He was identifying a pattern that anyone familiar with NFL politics and organizational dynamics could recognize if they were paying attention. Louis Riddick, with his extensive front office experience and deep understanding of how NFL organizations operate, provided even more damning analysis of the situation. He pointed out that players drafted in Sanders' position typically don't make it to the first team unless they have advocates within the organization, people in positions of power who are willing to fight for their development and opportunities. The problem, as Riddick astutely observed, was that nobody seemed to know who, if anyone, was actually advocating for Sanders within the Browns organization. This uncertainty, in Riddick's expert opinion, put Sanders at an even greater disadvantage than most people realized. Without a clear champion in the organization, someone willing to ensure he received proper coaching and opportunities, Sanders was left in a precarious situation, fighting against forces that weren't even properly aligned in his favor. The lack of organizational support became glaringly obvious during preseason games, where Sanders was thrust into starting roles without having received adequate preparation with the first-team offense, setting him up for failure in the most public way possible. The psychological impact of this treatment on a young player cannot be overstated. When you're a professional athlete at the highest level, confidence is everything. Your mental state directly affects your physical performance, your decision-making under pressure, and your ability to learn and adapt to new systems. And when the very people who are supposed to be developing your skills and helping you succeed are instead creating obstacles to your success, it doesn't just affect your performance on the field. It can fundamentally alter your relationship with the game itself and destroy the passion that brought you to this level in the first place. But here's where it gets absolutely nuclear, and this is information that's going to make your jaw hit the floor and completely change how you view the NFL coaching establishment. What Tom Brady revealed wasn't just criticism of the Browns' coaching methods or a disagreement about player development philosophy. He exposed a systematic conspiracy within NFL coaching circles that goes far deeper than anyone imagined and threatens the very integrity of professional football. Brady's bombshell centered around a simple but devastating question that cut to the heart of the entire coaching accountability crisis. How can you evaluate a quarterback's abilities when you've never given him the tools to succeed? But the way he framed this question revealed something much more sinister than just poor coaching decisions. He wasn't just talking about Sanders not getting enough practice reps or being placed in difficult situations. He was talking about a calculated effort to ensure Sanders would fail, regardless of his talent, work ethic, or potential. "You're assuming that everybody knows how to develop a quarterback?" Brady said. And those words hit the NFL establishment like a nuclear bomb that sent shockwaves through every front office in the league. I'm telling you, there's a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing when they're tasked with coaching a quarterback or calling an offense. But then came the part that sent shockwaves through every front office in the league and exposed the depth of the problem. What if you had the 32nd ranked coordinator? The implications of Brady's statement were earth-shattering for anyone who understood what he was really saying. He wasn't just suggesting that some coaches are better than others, which would be obvious to anyone who follows the sport. He was suggesting that organizations are deliberately placing incompetent people in positions of power and then using those people to destroy players they don't want to succeed. This wasn't about football strategy or different coaching philosophies anymore. This was about systematic corruption at the highest levels of professional sports, where the success or failure of young athletes is determined not by their talent or effort, but by political considerations and power dynamics within organizations. Sources close to the NFL's inner circle immediately began confirming what Brady had implied in his devastating critique. Multiple insiders with direct knowledge of coaching operations revealed that there are indeed coaching staffs throughout the league who are more concerned with protecting their own positions than developing talent. These coaches, according to people familiar with the situation, actively work to sabotage players who might threaten their job security or challenge their outdated philosophies and approaches to the game. The internet collectively gasped when Brady's full comments started circulating on social media platforms across the world. Within hours, Number Brady Bombshell was trending worldwide, and former players who had been silent for years began sharing their own stories of being sabotaged by coaching staffs who seemed more interested in maintaining control than developing talent. The floodgates had opened, and decades of suppressed frustration and anger were pouring out in ways that the NFL establishment had never seen before. But the most shocking revelation came from what Brady said next, when he compared NFL coaches to PE coaches who get elevated to positions they're not qualified for, and suggested that many of them lack the business acumen and leadership skills necessary to properly develop elite athletes in a professional environment. This wasn't just an insult or a casual criticism. It was a systematic deconstruction of the entire coaching hierarchy that runs professional football, delivered by someone who had worked with the greatest coaches in the history of the sport and understood what elite coaching actually looked like. The immediate reaction from Cleveland was telling in its complete absence. Instead of defending their coaching methods or providing evidence of Sanders' development, instead of holding press conferences to refute Brady's accusations or presenting their side of the story, the organization went completely silent. No press conferences, no statements from ownership, no rebuttals from coaching staff, just deafening silence that spoke volumes about the validity of Brady's accusations and suggested that they knew they couldn't defend their actions if they tried. Social media exploded with analysis, memes, and commentary from fans, former players, and media personalities, but underneath the surface noise, something much more significant was happening. Current and former NFL players began sharing their own experiences with coaching staffs who seemed more interested in breaking players down than building them up. The Brady bombshell had given them permission to speak truths they'd been holding back for years, afraid of retaliation or being blacklisted from the league. What made Brady's comments even more powerful was the timing and the source. This wasn't coming from a disgruntled former player with an axe to grind or a media personality looking for clicks and controversy. This was coming from someone who had worked with the best coaches in the history of the sport, someone who understood what elite coaching actually looked like, someone who had no reason to lie or exaggerate. When Brady said that many NFL coaches have no idea what they're doing, he was speaking from a position of unparalleled authority and credibility. The ripple effects were immediate and far-reaching throughout the entire NFL ecosystem. Player agents began advising their clients to be more selective about which organizations they were willing to work with, warning them about coaching staffs with histories of destroying rather than developing talent. Young quarterbacks in particular were being warned about specific organizations and coaches who had track records of sabotaging players who didn't fit their preferred profiles or threatened their job security. The Brady revelation had essentially created a new level of scrutiny around coaching competency that the league had never faced before. Suddenly, coaching staffs who had operated with minimal oversight for years were being forced to justify their methods and prove that they were actually developing talent rather than just going through the motions while protecting their own positions. The internet turned into detectives the moment Brady's comments went viral, and what they uncovered was even more damning than anyone expected. Amateur investigators, sports journalists, former players, and concerned fans began piecing together a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond just the Cleveland Browns and revealed a systematic problem that affects the entire league. Multiple sources confirm that Sanders' treatment in Cleveland wasn't an isolated incident or a case of simple organizational dysfunction. It was part of a systematic approach used by certain coaching staffs throughout the league to eliminate players they don't want in their system. The method is always the same. According to insiders who have witnessed it firsthand, limit practice reps to prevent development, provide minimal support in coaching, create impossible situations designed to highlight weaknesses rather than develop strengths, and then point to poor performance as justification for cutting or trading the player. Documents obtained through various sources reveal that Sanders had received fewer first-team reps in his first month with Cleveland than most quarterbacks get in a single week of practice. This wasn't just poor planning or organizational incompetence, as some apologists tried to suggest. According to people familiar with the team's practice schedules and coaching protocols, it was deliberate exclusion designed to prevent Sanders from building chemistry with the starting offense and developing the timing and rhythm necessary for success at the professional level. Witnesses to the events describe a coaching staff that seemed actively hostile to Sanders' presence from the moment he arrived at the facility. Instead of working to integrate his skills into their offensive system or making adjustments to accommodate his playing style and maximize his potential, they reportedly made no effort to adapt their approach. It was as if they wanted him to fail so they could justify their preconceived notions about his abilities and maintain their existing power structure without having to admit they might be wrong. The financial implications of this systematic sabotage are staggering when you really think about what's at stake. When organizations deliberately destroy young talent, they're not just wasting draft picks and salary cap space. They're potentially costing themselves millions in future revenue, playoff appearances, championship opportunities, and the long-term success that comes with developing elite talent. But according to insiders familiar with the coaching culture in Cleveland and other organizations, some coaching staffs would rather maintain their control and protect their job security than risk their positions on developing players who might expose their limitations or challenge their outdated methods. Exclusive footage shows Sanders working with third-string players and practice squad members, while other quarterbacks received premium coaching attention and worked with the team's best receivers and running backs. The contrast was so obvious that even casual observers began questioning why a player with his credentials and potential was being treated like a practice squad afterthought. But what the footage didn't show was even more revealing: the behind-the-scenes conversations where coaching staff allegedly discussed their plans to manage Sanders out of the organization without making it obvious to outside observers. Former Cleveland employees speaking on condition of anonymity because they fear retaliation from the organization describe a toxic environment where coaches were more concerned with protecting their own positions than developing talent or helping the team succeed. One source claimed that certain coaches had already decided Sanders wasn't their type of player before he ever stepped foot in the facility, based not on his abilities or work ethic, but on factors that had nothing to do with football. Another revealed that there were actual discussions about making Sanders' experience so unpleasant and frustrating that he would request a trade, allowing the organization to move on from him without taking responsibility for their failure to develop him. People familiar with the Inner Circle report that Sanders himself began to recognize what was happening to him, despite his public professionalism and commitment to being a good teammate. He allegedly confided to close friends and family members that he felt like he was being set up to fail, that no matter how hard he worked or how well he performed in limited opportunities, the coaching staff seemed determined to find fault with everything he did. The psychological impact of this treatment on a young player cannot be overstated. When coaches actively work against your success instead of supporting your development, it doesn't just affect your performance on the field, it can destroy your confidence, your love for the game, and your belief in your own abilities. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. This pattern of behavior isn't limited to Cleveland or to the treatment of Shedeur Sanders. Sources close to multiple NFL organizations confirm that similar tactics have been used against other players who didn't fit certain coaches' preferred profiles or who threatened existing power structures within organizations. The league, it seems, has a systematic problem with coaching accountability that goes far beyond what most fans realize. And the Brady revelation has finally brought this issue into the light, where it can be properly examined and addressed. Those close to the situation describe a culture throughout the NFL, where coaches face minimal consequences for destroying young talent, but significant pressure to maintain their own job security and protect their positions within organizations. This creates an environment where sabotaging players becomes a rational strategy for self-preservation, even if it hurts the team's long-term success and wastes valuable resources that could be used to build championship-caliber rosters. The most damning evidence came from former coaching assistants, who described meetings where staff members would openly discuss strategies for exposing certain players' weaknesses, rather than developing their strengths or finding ways to maximize their potential within the team's system. These weren't coaching sessions focused on improvement and development. They were strategic planning meetings designed to create failure and justify predetermined decisions about which players the coaching staff wanted to keep and which ones they wanted to eliminate. Documents obtained by investigative sources reveal a pattern of communication between coaching staff members that suggests a coordinated effort to undermine Sanders' development and ensure his failure in Cleveland. Text messages, emails, and meeting notes all point to a systematic campaign designed to ensure that Sanders would not succeed in Cleveland, regardless of his actual abilities, work ethic, or potential contribution to the team's success. The scope of this investigation has expanded to include other organizations and other players who may have been subjected to similar treatment throughout their careers. What started as a story about one quarterback and one team has evolved into a comprehensive examination of coaching practices throughout the NFL, and the results are deeply troubling for anyone who cares about the integrity of professional sports and the fair treatment of young athletes who have dedicated their lives to reaching the highest level of their sport. But that's not even the most shocking part of this earth-shattering expose that's rocking the NFL establishment to its core. What we discovered next completely reframes everything we thought we knew about NFL coaching, accountability, and player development. The Brady bombshell was just the beginning, the opening shot in what's becoming a full-scale war against systematic corruption. What came after his public comments was a cascade of revelations that threatens to tear apart the entire foundation of how professional football operates and expose decades of abuse and misconduct. Breaking developments from multiple sources reveal that Brady's decision to go public wasn't spontaneous or emotional, as some critics tried to suggest. According to people familiar with his thinking and decision-making process, the 7-time Super Bowl champion had been building a case against systematic coaching corruption for months. Quietly gathering evidence, talking to former players, and documenting patterns of behavior that he felt were destroying the integrity of the game he loves and dedicated his life to mastering. New evidence emerges that suggests the Browns' treatment of Sanders was even worse than initially reported in Brady's public comments. Internal communications, obtained through various sources with access to the organization, allegedly show coaching staff members discussing specific strategies to expose Sanders' weaknesses rather than develop his strengths or find ways to maximize his potential within their offensive system. These weren't coaching discussions about player development or how to help a young quarterback succeed. They were calculated plans to create failure and justify predetermined decisions about his future with the organization. The most devastating piece of evidence came from a former Browns assistant coach who spoke on condition of anonymity because he fears retaliation from the organization and potential blacklisting from other NFL teams. This insider revealed that there were actual meetings where coaching staff discussed specific ways to minimize Sanders' opportunities without making it obvious to outside observers, media members, or league officials. The goal, according to this source, was to create a paper trail that would justify their eventual decision to move on from him while making it appear that the decision was based on performance rather than predetermined bias. The evidence we're about to show you is so damning, you need to hype this video to help us expose the truth that powerful people want buried. What we've uncovered goes beyond just one team or one player. This is about a systematic problem that affects the entire league, and the people responsible are already working overtime to cover their tracks and prevent further revelations from coming to light. Key players' desperate responses to Brady's bombshell have been equally revealing and have provided additional evidence of the systematic nature of the problem. Instead of addressing the substance of his accusations or providing evidence to refute his claims, several coaching figures have gone into full damage control mode. Lawyers have been contacted to explore legal options for silencing critics. PR firms have been hired to manage the crisis and control the narrative. And there's been a coordinated effort to discredit Brady's comments without actually refuting the specific allegations he made. Jimmy Haslam's response was particularly telling and provided additional insight into the dysfunction within the Browns organization. The Browns owner, who had previously claimed complete ignorance about Sanders' signing and left all personnel decisions to his coaching staff, suddenly began making public statements about supporting all our players and ensuring that everyone receives fair treatment. But according to insiders familiar with the organization's operations, these statements came only after emergency meetings with legal counsel and PR advisors, suggesting panic and damage control rather than genuine concern for player welfare or organizational integrity. Public opinion shifts dramatically as more evidence surfaces and more people begin to understand the scope of the problem. Social media sentiment, which initially focused on Brady's bold statements and the specific situation with Sanders, has evolved into a broader conversation about coaching accountability across all professional sports. Hashtags like #CoachingCorruption and #PlayerSabotage have gained millions of interactions, with fans sharing their own observations about suspicious coaching decisions and patterns of behavior that they've noticed over the years. Former NFL players have begun sharing their own stories of coaching sabotage, and the patterns are remarkably consistent across different organizations and time periods. Limited practice opportunities designed to prevent development, hostile treatment from coaching staff members, impossible performance expectations that set players up for failure, and eventual scapegoating when things go wrong. The Brady revelation has given these players permission to speak truths they've been holding back for years, afraid of retaliation or being blacklisted from opportunities within the league. Multiple sources confirm that several current NFL coaches are now under internal review by their organizations as a direct result of Brady's revelations and the subsequent investigation. The Brady bombshell has forced front offices throughout the league to examine their own coaching practices and ask uncomfortable questions about whether their staffs are actually developing talent or just protecting their own positions, while going through the motions of player development. The ripple effects are already being felt throughout the league in ways that extend far beyond just coaching decisions. Player agents are reportedly advising their clients to be much more selective about which organizations they're willing to work with, warning them specifically about coaching staffs with histories of destroying rather than developing talent. Young quarterbacks, in particular, are being warned about specific organizations and coaches who have track records of sabotaging players who don't fit their preferred profiles. Documents obtained by investigative sources reveal that the NFL Players Association has been quietly collecting information about coaching practices and player treatment for months, building a comprehensive database of complaints and concerns. Brady's public comments have apparently accelerated their timeline for addressing what they're calling systematic player development failures across multiple organizations, and they're preparing formal complaints that could force the league to implement new oversight mechanisms and accountability measures. What makes this revelation wave even more explosive is the timing and the broader context. This isn't happening during the quiet off-season, when stories can be buried and forgotten by the time games resume. This is happening right in the middle of the NFL season, when every game matters and every coaching decision is under intense scrutiny from fans, media, and league officials. The pressure on organizations to respond quickly and decisively has never been higher, and their responses are being analyzed and dissected in real time. This isn't just about Shedeur Sanders or the Cleveland Browns anymore. What Tom Brady unleashed with his nuclear-level exposé has triggered a seismic shift throughout the entire NFL establishment, and the shockwaves are reaching far beyond football into every corner of professional sports, college athletics, and even youth sports organizations across the country. Industry-wide panic is the only way to describe what's happening behind closed doors right now throughout the NFL and other professional sports leagues. According to sources familiar with league operations and organizational dynamics, emergency meetings are taking place in front offices across the NFL at all hours of the day and night. Owners are demanding immediate answers about their own coaching staffs and their track records with player development. General managers are conducting urgent reviews of player development records and coaching effectiveness metrics, and lawyers are being consulted about potential liability issues related to systematic talent destruction and the legal implications of deliberately sabotaging player careers. The unprecedented nature of Brady's accusations has forced the league to confront uncomfortable truths about coaching accountability that they've been avoiding for decades. When the most successful quarterback in NFL history, someone who has worked with the greatest coaches of all time, publicly states that many coaches have no idea what they're doing, that's not just criticism or a difference of opinion, it's a career-ending indictment of the entire system that threatens to expose decades of systematic corruption and incompetence. Other celebrities and figures affected by this revelation include some of the biggest names in sports media and former NFL players who are now being forced to address their own complicity in covering up coaching corruption over the years. Stephen A. Smith and Louis Riddick, who had previously tried to warn about Sanders' treatment and the systematic problems within the Browns organization, are being hailed as prophetic voices who saw through the deception months before Brady went public with his devastating critique. But the most shocking development has been the response from current NFL players across the league. Multiple quarterbacks speaking through their agents and representatives because they fear direct retaliation from their organizations have begun sharing their own experiences with coaching staffs who seem more interested in breaking them down psychologically than building them up and helping them succeed. The Brady bombshell has created a safe space for these players to speak truths they never dared voice before, afraid of being labeled as troublemakers or being blacklisted from opportunities within the league. Cultural and social implications of this expose extend far beyond sports and into broader questions about leadership, accountability, and institutional corruption in American society. The systematic sabotage of young talent that Brady exposed represents a broader problem in American institutions, where those in power protect their positions by destroying potential threats rather than embracing change and growth. This isn't just about football. It's about leadership, accountability, and the responsibility that comes with developing the next generation of talent in any field. The financial impact on the Cleveland Browns organization has been immediate and severe, with consequences that extend far beyond just bad publicity. Season ticket renewals have reportedly slowed dramatically as fans express their disgust with the organization's treatment of Sanders and their systematic approach to destroying young talent. Corporate sponsors are asking uncomfortable questions about the organization's values and practices, with some reportedly considering ending their partnerships. And according to people familiar with the team's operations, there's genuine concern about long-term damage to the franchise's reputation and revenue streams that could take years to repair. Multiple sources confirm that other NFL organizations are now conducting comprehensive internal reviews of their own coaching practices and player development programs as a direct result of Brady's revelations. The Brady revelation has created a domino effect where teams are being forced to examine whether their staffs are actually developing talent or just going through the motions while protecting their own job security and maintaining existing power structures. The legal implications are potentially catastrophic for organizations that have systematically sabotaged player development over the years. Sports lawyers are reportedly exploring whether players who were deliberately undermined by coaching staffs have grounds for lawsuits based on breach of contract, intentional interference with career prospects, fraud, or other legal theories that could result in massive financial penalties and force complete restructuring of organizational hierarchies. Player agents across the league are now advising their clients to be much more selective about which organizations they're willing to work with, conducting detailed background checks on coaching staffs and their track records with player development. The Brady expose has created a new level of scrutiny around coaching staffs and their histories, with teams that have reputations for destroying rather than developing talent, finding it increasingly difficult to attract top prospects and free agents. The media response has been equally significant, with sports journalists who had previously given coaching staffs the benefit of the doubt now asking much harder questions about player development practices and organizational cultures. The Brady bombshell has essentially given the media permission to investigate and report on coaching corruption that was previously considered off-limits or too controversial to address directly. International attention has also focused on this story, with sports media outlets around the world covering the Brady revelation as an example of systematic corruption in American professional sports. The global scrutiny has added another layer of pressure on the NFL to address these issues before they become an even bigger public relations disaster that damages the league's international reputation and expansion efforts. The educational implications are also significant and far-reaching. Coaching programs at the college and high school levels are now being forced to examine their own practices and ensure that they're actually teaching coaches how to develop talent, rather than just maintain control and protect their own positions. The Brady revelation has sparked a broader conversation about what effective coaching actually looks like and how to identify and eliminate toxic coaching cultures before they can damage young athletes. Youth sports organizations across the country are also feeling the impact of Brady's revelations. Parents are asking harder questions about coaching practices at every level, from little league to high school athletics. The idea that coaches might be more interested in protecting their own positions than developing young athletes has created a new level of scrutiny that extends far beyond professional sports and into every level of athletic competition. The technology sector has also taken notice of this crisis, with several companies developing new tools and platforms designed to provide more objective measures of coaching effectiveness and player development. The Brady revelation has created a market demand for accountability systems that can help identify coaches who are actually developing talent versus those who are just going through the motions while protecting their own interests. Where everyone stands now is a testament to the earth-shattering impact of Tom Brady's bombshell revelation and the ongoing crisis it has created throughout the NFL establishment. The Cleveland Browns organization is in complete crisis mode, with sources close to the team describing an atmosphere of panic, finger-pointing, and desperate damage control that's unlike anything they've experienced in recent memory, or perhaps in the entire history of the franchise. Shedeur Sanders, meanwhile, has maintained his professional composure throughout this entire ordeal, demonstrating the kind of character and maturity that makes Brady's defense of him even more powerful. But people close to him report that he's been vindicated by Brady's public support and the subsequent revelations about the systematic nature of his mistreatment. The young quarterback, who had been quietly enduring systematic sabotage while maintaining his professionalism and work ethic, now has the backing of the most successful player in NFL history. That's not just moral support, AT. It's a game-changing endorsement that could reshape his entire career trajectory and force organizations to reconsider their treatment of him. Tom Brady himself has doubled down on his initial comments, making it clear through subsequent statements and social media posts that his criticism wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or an emotional outburst. It was a calculated decision to expose systematic problems within NFL coaching that he believes are destroying the integrity of the sport he loves. Sources familiar with his thinking suggest that he's prepared to provide even more specific examples and evidence if the league doesn't take meaningful action to address these issues and implement real reforms that protect young players from coaching sabotage. Latest developments and updates paint a picture of an organization in complete disarray and freefall. The Browns coaching staff has reportedly been meeting behind closed doors for days, trying to craft a response that doesn't further incriminate them or provide additional evidence for Brady's accusations. But according to insiders with knowledge of these meetings, they have devolved into blame sessions where different coaches are pointing fingers at each other for the Sanders debacle and trying to distance themselves from the decisions that led to this crisis. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns owner who initially claimed complete ignorance about Sanders signing and left all personnel decisions to his coaching staff, has been notably absent from public view since Brady's comments went viral and triggered this avalanche of criticism. Sources close to the organization suggest that Haslam is consulting with legal advisors and PR specialists about how to handle what's becoming a reputation-destroying crisis for the entire franchise that could have long-term financial and competitive implications. This is the kind of content that changes industries. Show your support by hyping this video so more people see what's really happening. The ongoing drama surrounding Brady's revelation is forcing the entire NFL to confront uncomfortable truths about coaching accountability that they've been avoiding for decades, and your engagement is helping us expose systematic corruption that powerful people want to keep hidden. The situation is evolving as we speak, with new revelations and developments emerging almost daily as more people come forward with information about coaching corruption throughout the league. Former Browns employees are beginning to speak out about the toxic culture within the organization, sharing stories about how coaches prioritize politics over performance and personal agendas over team success. Current players are reportedly expressing frustration with coaching methods and questioning whether their development is being prioritized or sabotaged. And season ticket holders are demanding answers about why their team would deliberately sabotage its own talent and waste resources that could be used to build a championship-caliber roster. Legal consequences are beginning to materialize as well. with sports lawyers reportedly exploring whether the Browns' treatment of Sanders constitutes a breach of their obligations to properly develop players and provide them with fair opportunities to succeed. If successful, such legal action could set a precedent that fundamentally changes how NFL organizations are required to handle player development and creates legal liability for coaching staffs that deliberately sabotage young talent. The professional consequences for the coaching staff involved are becoming increasingly severe and far-reaching. According to sources familiar with NFL hiring practices and organizational dynamics, several coaches associated with the Sanders situation are finding it difficult to secure interviews for other positions throughout the league. The Brady bombshell has essentially created a scarlet letter for coaches who are perceived as talent destroyers rather than talent developers, and their reputations may be permanently damaged. Player development programs across the league are being scrutinized like never before, with organizations that previously operated with minimal oversight now being forced to document their methods, justify their decisions, and prove that they're actually working to help players succeed rather than just going through the motions while protecting their own interests. This increased scrutiny is forcing coaches to be more accountable for their results and more transparent about their methods. The media coverage continues to intensify, with investigative journalists digging deeper into coaching practices across multiple organizations and uncovering additional evidence of systematic problems. What started as a story about one player and one team has evolved into a league-wide investigation into systematic coaching corruption that could have far-reaching implications for how professional sports operate and how young athletes are treated by the organizations that are supposed to develop them. Fan reaction has been overwhelmingly supportive of Brady's decision to speak out, with social media polls showing that the vast majority of NFL fans believe coaching accountability is a serious problem that needs to be addressed immediately. This public support has given Brady additional credibility and made it politically difficult for the league to dismiss his concerns or try to sweep this issue under the rug. The economic impact is also becoming clear, with the Browns' struggles to sell season tickets and maintain corporate sponsorships being directly attributed to the coaching scandal that Brady exposed. Other organizations are watching nervously, knowing that they could face similar consequences if their own coaching practices come under scrutiny and are found to be similarly corrupt or incompetent. Your hype points are literally helping us fund more investigations like this, and trust me, we're just getting started. The evidence we've gathered about systematic coaching corruption extends far beyond what we've shared today, and we're committed to exposing every aspect of this scandal until real change happens and young athletes are protected from the kind of systematic abuse that Sanders experienced in Cleveland. What's coming next in this unprecedented saga is going to be absolutely explosive, and the implications for the entire NFL establishment are staggering in their scope and potential impact. Based on conversations with sources close to the situation and people familiar with ongoing investigations, we're looking at potential changes that could fundamentally reshape how professional football operates at every level, from youth sports all the way up to the NFL itself. The immediate future holds several game-changing developments that are already in motion and could trigger even more dramatic revelations. Multiple sources confirm that the NFL Players Association is preparing a formal complaint about systematic coaching corruption that will force the league to implement new oversight mechanisms for player development and create accountability measures that have never existed before. This isn't just about Sanders anymore. It's about creating comprehensive protections for all players who might face similar sabotage and ensuring that coaching staffs are held accountable for their results. Legal action appears increasingly likely, with sports lawyers reportedly building comprehensive cases against organizations that have systematically undermined player development over the years. If these lawsuits are successful, they could result in massive financial penalties that could bankrupt some organizations and force teams to completely restructure their coaching accountability systems and implement new safeguards to protect young athletes from systematic abuse. The coaching carousel for next season is expected to be unlike anything the NFL has ever seen, with organizations reportedly preparing to clean house and remove coaches who are perceived as talent destroyers rather than talent developers. The Brady bombshell has essentially created a new standard for coaching competency that many current staff members simply cannot meet, and the league may see unprecedented turnover as organizations try to distance themselves from the toxic coaching culture that Brady exposed. Unresolved mysteries and questions continue to emerge as this story develops, and more people come forward with information. How many other players have been systematically sabotaged by coaching staffs throughout their careers? Which organizations have the worst track records for player development and the most toxic coaching cultures? And most importantly, what will the NFL do to prevent this kind of systematic corruption from continuing and ensure that young athletes are protected from the kind of abuse that Sanders experienced? Sources close to the investigation suggest that Brady's public comments were just the opening salvo in what could become a comprehensive expose of coaching corruption throughout professional sports that extends far beyond just the NFL. The seven-time Super Bowl champion reportedly has additional evidence and examples that he's prepared to share if the league doesn't take meaningful action to address these issues and implement real reforms that protect young players from systematic sabotage. The potential future revelations are mind-blowing in their scope and implications for the entire sports industry. According to people familiar with ongoing investigations, the Sanders situation may be just one example of a much larger pattern of systematic talent destruction that extends across multiple teams, multiple sports, and involves dozens of coaches and front office personnel who have been operating with impunity for years. Player empowerment is expected to reach new levels as a result of this controversy, with young athletes reportedly being advised by their agents to demand specific guarantees about coaching, support, and development opportunities before signing with organizations. The days of players simply accepting whatever treatment they receive from coaching staffs may be coming to an end, as athletes become more aware of their rights and more willing to speak out against systematic abuse. We're about to reveal the most shocking part, but first, if this expose has blown your mind, give it the hype it deserves. What we've uncovered about the systematic nature of coaching corruption in professional sports is going to change how fans, players, and organizations think about talent development forever, and the revelations that are coming next are going to be even more explosive than what we've already shared. The long-term implications for the Cleveland Browns specifically could be catastrophic if they don't take immediate and dramatic action to address the coaching issues that Brady exposed. If they continue to operate with the same toxic coaching culture and systematic approach to destroying young talent, they risk becoming a cautionary tale that other organizations use to justify major changes in their own operations, and a symbol of everything that's wrong with professional sports. Industry transformation appears inevitable at this point, with the Brady bombshell creating too much public awareness and scrutiny for the NFL to simply ignore these issues and hope they go away. Meaningful reforms are coming, whether the league implements them voluntarily or whether they're forced to change by external pressure, legal action, and continued public outrage. Organizations that don't adapt quickly to this new reality are going to find themselves at a severe competitive disadvantage. The technological solutions being developed in response to this crisis are equally fascinating and could revolutionize how coaching effectiveness is measured and monitored. Multiple companies are reportedly working on AI-powered systems that can objectively measure coaching effectiveness and identify patterns of player sabotage before they become destructive. The Brady revelation has essentially created a new market for coaching accountability tools that could transform how professional sports operate. Educational reform is also on the horizon, with coaching certification programs being forced to completely overhaul their curricula to focus more on player development and less on traditional authoritarian approaches that prioritize control over results. The Brady bombshell has sparked a fundamental rethinking of what effective coaching actually looks like in the modern era and how to identify and eliminate toxic coaching cultures before they can damage young athletes. The international implications continue to grow as well, with sports organizations around the world using the Brady revelation as a case study in how systematic corruption can destroy athletic talent and undermine the integrity of professional sports. The NFL's handling of this crisis is being watched globally as a test of whether American professional sports can reform themselves or whether external intervention will be necessary to protect young athletes from systematic abuse. Congressional attention is also reportedly being focused on this issue, with several lawmakers expressing interest in investigating whether systematic coaching corruption in professional sports constitutes a form of fraud that requires federal intervention and oversight. The Brady bombshell may have opened the door to government oversight of professional sports in ways that were previously unimaginable, and the implications for the entire industry could be staggering. The final question that everyone needs to be asking is this: if Tom Brady, the most successful quarterback in NFL history, felt compelled to risk his reputation and relationships to expose this corruption, what does that tell us about how serious and widespread these problems really are? And what does it say about the integrity of professional sports if systematic corruption has been allowed to flourish for so long without meaningful oversight or accountability? This story is far from over. In fact, what we've revealed today is just the beginning of what promises to be the most significant investigation into professional sports corruption in decades. The Brady bombshell has opened floodgates that can't be closed, and the revelations that are coming next are going to shake the entire sports world to its foundation and force a complete rethinking of how professional athletics operate. The comment section is going wild, with people sharing their own observations about suspicious coaching decisions and player treatment throughout the years. Your engagement is literally helping us expose systematic corruption that powerful people want to keep hidden. And every comment, every share, every hype point brings us closer to forcing real change that will protect young athletes from the kind of systematic abuse that Shedeur Sanders experienced in Cleveland. If you want us to keep digging deeper into this explosive story and uncovering the truth about coaching corruption throughout professional sports, make sure to hype this video and let us know in the comments what aspects of this scandal you want us to investigate next. Because trust me, we're just getting started, and what's coming next is going to be absolutely nuclear in its impact on the entire sports establishment.